The two values I think that you have to believe in are compassion and justice. And if a therapist doesn't believe in those two things, they have no business being a therapist. So can we agree that we should treat our fellow human beings with the utmost respect because they're a human being? Number one. And number two, can we be opposed to any economic, social, political system that denies that humanity?
Hello, Lane and Kiwi.
Oh, hi.
You have to show everybody Kiwi's cute little face, even though he is the destructor of all things. Well, really himself. He's the biggest destructor. Kiwi, if you're just listening to this on audio, you don't get to see Kiwi's cute face and long cat body. But so go to YouTube and follow us there if you want to actually see a cute kitten. He is so cute, but so expensive. Oh my God.
Yes, he is. You called him a lemon.
He is a lemon.
He's a lemon. Yeah. So
he's a lemon. Take him back. God made him wrong.
Yeah. Oh, Kiwi.
He's so cute, though. He's so sweet. Anyway. So how were you, Lane?
I'm doing all right, hanging in there. Yeah, the state of the world is scary as we're recording these intros. Yeah, and I feel like it has been every time we've recorded intros. Kind of hanging in there nonetheless. How are you doing?
Yeah, there's like a shroud of darkness somehow, and I'm glad that this conversation brings a little bit of hope because it's dark times right now. We are in the darkest timeline.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And yeah, your conversation with Frank, I think, was a lovely, shred of hope, like you said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this question we've sort of been batting around in a lot of different episodes, and I have also just been talking about this in a bunch of different places, this idea that therapy is political. Frank and I try to operationalize that a little bit more. And I mean, I think it's still going to be an evolving conversation for, who knows, however long. But yeah, so we talk about that, and we talk about the dominant narratives and ideologies and how that's impacting people in therapy, how we move through crisis, and sort of the tightrope of business, capitalism, and exploitation.
Your conversation with Frank reminded me a lot of your conversation with Steve Judd, too. I think a lot of very similar topics came up. And it's always interesting to me when people from, different walks of life or professions get to the same place, even though their schooling or education is so different. Yeah, we're all kind of grappling with the same reality,
Well, that's what's been so interesting about my journey with astrology. So I listen to probably 5 different astrologers on a regular basis, and I kind of in my head find the thread that they all have in common. And then I'm also following people who follow history really well. There's a history professor, I can't remember his name, but I just started following him. And he talks a lot about what's happening right now, framed in the vein of history. I'll have to find it and talk about him next episode maybe. But when they all say the same thing, it's wild.
It's so true. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think people are really going to dig Frank. Frank's episode is a really good combination of all of sort of the different levels, from the individual to the mezzo and the macro, and how we can think about change and how we do therapy in times like these. So yeah, so I think people will dig it. So let me introduce you to Frank Gruba-McCallister. He is a retired clinical psychologist who works in health psychology and as a faculty member and academic administrator at 3 Chicago area professional psychology schools. His current focus is in the areas of critical psychology, radical therapy, and advancement of social justice. His latest book, Radical Healing: No Wellness Without Justice, is available now. So please enjoy my convo with Frank Gruba-McCallister. Hello. Welcome, Frank. Nice to have you with Conversations with a Wounded Healer.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Wonderful. Well, you wrote a book, and I'm excited to talk about. So too many things in my way. I wanted to show everybody. I know it's backwards, but radical healing, no wellness without justice. And I had seen my friend Cynthia posted that you were doing a very short lecture, and I went to that virtually and was super excited because everything you said, I was like, yes, yes, nom, 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 give me more. And I heard another podcast that you were on, and I was like, and I have questions. So I'm super excited to just like dig in wherever feels good and get to know you and your journey and why this book was important. I know that's kind of like everything all at once. So
Sure.
maybe let's start with tell me about entering the field.
I was, you might say, a reluctant psychologist in a way. I grew up in a blue-collar family, and when I went to college, I decided I needed to find something where I would be able to find a job, because that's sort of what you are told when you're growing up that way. Although I really liked philosophy a great deal. My first psychology course was rather disappointing. It seemed as though it was dealing with a lot of things in a very trivial, kind of inhumane fashion. It really didn't seem like they were talking about important issues. But, I stuck it out. And I then went to graduate school at Purdue. And my early career was working with medical patients mostly, or what would be called health psychology now. And something that I learned from that is that lots of times the issues that people have, it's not because there's something wrong with them from a pathology point of view. It's really that they're dealing with difficult situations, serious loss. And that sort of confirmed my already being more of a humanistic, existential type of thinker. I then went on to teach, which is really what I wanted ultimately to do. I did that for over 30 years at different professional schools of psychology. But over the course of that time, I got more and more interested in the importance of the role of psychology in advancing social justice. And that's really where my passion is right now. What that has really done is it's sort of built on the idea that, people don't have problems because there's something seriously wrong with them, but it's because they are being oppressed, exploited, discriminated against by an economic and political system that is basically toxic. What I see as capitalism, basically, as being the problem. So that's sort of a thumbnail of the journey that I've made. And really what I've been writing about in the latter part of my career, now that I'm retired, has been really about critical psychology, liberatory psychology, a critique of capitalism, the importance of recognizing how ideology people to suffer.
And I would throw in there from my lens, not just the ideologies, but also the way that people relate to themselves and others within an ideology. Because often I found, and it's not, this is not like a one-to-one, but once people can recognize, like see what's happening, right? Be able to kind of like pull the curtain away and recognize where their choices are, that can shift a lot, even when the external circumstances don't change.
I think that is true. My only caution about that is that that's the default of psychology, because it's so highly individualistic. It's like we almost always are prone to say whatever is going on that's not working is going on inside of you. And
it should be simultaneous.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So we have to empower people to challenge economic systems, political systems. But that doesn't negate the importance of them doing work with respect to their own development and growth.
Yeah. So here's one of the places where I would love to get into the nitty-gritty of it, because I agree with you on the face of it. And what I have seen shift, because I'm a social worker too, so that also kind of colors my training is definitely bent towards social justice.
Mm-hmm.
What I have seen over the years was no focus on it whatsoever. No focus on social justice, capitalism, anything. And then 2020 happened, and there was this big awakening for a lot of folks who were like, yeah, okay, now I'm a social justice warrior. I'm anti-racist. I'm anti-capitalist. I'm all these things. And they have the information, but they don't necessarily have it embodied. And there's a lot of people that I have seen out there sharing information from a place of judgment of what other people are doing instead of like, here's how we work together towards solution. So I'm curious because when did you retire? Was it fairly recent or?
It was about 5 or 6 years ago.
Okay. So I'm curious then if you have seen this shift, not being in contact with as many students over the time, and what comes up for you around that as I share what I've witnessed.
I have seen what you're talking about. I mean, when I was at Adler and I was trying to change the curriculum there,
Mm-hmm.
I got a lot of people saying, this is a great idea. And I say, okay, good. Then this is what we're going to do, So make sure that when you teach a course, have a social justice exit competency.
Mm-hmm.
And they would say, well, what is that?
Yeah.
And I would go, okay, well, obviously you're on board, but you're not on board. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
It sounds good.
Yeah.
And it's almost like virtue signaling. It's like, I'm on board. I really believe in what you're talking about, but does it mean I really have to change what I'm doing? Because I don't want to change what I'm doing.
Yes.
And I would say,
or I don't have the tools yet.
Right.
Because again, that goes back to the embodied piece of it, right? Like if you are living this ideology, it's less about teaching and it's more about just being, because people then can learn from who you are and how you exist rather than just like what you're telling them.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, if you don't live your principles, people see through that. I mean, a good example of that is, when we bring people into therapy, we say, well, you're going to have to look at how your worldview has affected you. And that means you're going to have to probably give it up. Well, to give up your worldview is the hardest thing in the world to do, right? Because you equate it with who I am. But by the same token, if you tell a psychologist, well, the way you were trained or a social worker, whatever the case may be, it really supports capitalism. You're going to have to examine your worldview. They look at you like, why should I do that?
Right.
Well, if it's good for the goose, it has to be good for the gander. Right. In other words, if you're not willing to make that journey, then why would you ask somebody else to make it? They're going to see right through you.
And I don't know that people are seeing right through it right now. Like there is a lot of virtue signaling. There's a lot of, again, a non-embodied way of approaching a lot of this work. And I especially find where so I don't know when this is going to come out, but we're recording right now at the end of 2025. And, so we're in the midst of a lot of stuff happening. And it feels, maybe this is just my perception, but I'd love your thoughts. It feels to me that when we're not embodying these values, when we're not living these values, when we don't spend time connected in community, it's so much easier to get burnt out because we're trying to fight dragons that can't be slayed by us.
Mm-hmm.
They're a collective effort. And that's one thing I feel like is missing specifically in the therapy profession. Like I want us to have a shared understanding of what the idea of therapy as political actually means, because some people I see bringing it in the therapy room in a really beautiful, embodied, grounded way. And other people, I hear them basically being like, well, cut off your, Trump voting family. And those two things are vastly different for me.
Yeah.
So how do you see us figuring out a way to operationalize what you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. And as I think about it, it's sort of like people will say, well, if you go into therapy, you have an agenda. Well, everybody has an agenda when they go into therapy. Every therapist has an agenda.
Yeah.
So the idea that, well, how could you have an agenda? It doesn't really ring true to me. It's like, come on, really?
So get honest.
Right. You have
Step
to be
one.
right. It's like be transparent about what your agenda is.
Right.
Be open to dialoguing about it. Be open to saying we may not see the world the same way. Okay.
Right.
But that doesn't mean we won't be able to find something commonly to work on.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it's not so much a matter of telling people, well, why don't you be more open to socialism, for example? Because they might look at you like, I'm not going to do that. It's a question of values.
Right.
And the two values I think that you have to believe in are compassion and justice.
Mm-hmm.
And if a therapist doesn't believe in those two things, they have no business being a therapist, as far as I'm concerned. So can we agree that we should treat our fellow human beings with the utmost respect because they're a human being?
Yeah.
Number one.
Yeah.
Okay. Can we do that? And number two, can we be opposed to any economic, social, political system that denies that humanity, seeing that as inherently unjust, right? So I think, for example, let's say when people are seeing now that we have fascist people, ICE, right, taking and smashing people's windows, dragging them out of a car, waiting in a parking lot to, take a person who's doing lawn care, whatever the case may be, because of how they look.
Right.
Even people that might have at one time say, well, we need stricter immigration laws, they're looking at that now and saying, this is crazy. Well, you see, that shows that we could have differences in terms of where we are on that continuum.
Right.
But when it's in your face that way, then people begin to say, well, that's not how you treat people. And that's a place where we can meet.
Right.
Right. That's not a way that we should treat people. Now, let's talk about why we're in a situation now where we treat people that way.
And what does that look like in your day-to-day?
Right. Exactly. And how does that fit with your own lived experience?
Right.
And that's where I see a lot of politicians is out of touch.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're in their own little bubble. The people that they're concerned about are people that give them money and help them get elected. And, they could talk from now to the cows come home about, working people, but that's not, they haven't a clue about those people.
Yeah.
And therefore, why should we expect that they're going to do anything to address their needs? Because they don't know the lived experiences of those people. Or even if they know them, they don't care.
Yeah. How much of this is just totally like your opinion, or maybe you actually know the answer to it. How much of it do you think is like intentional? And how much do you think it's just sort of the ball got rolling and it just has been rolling out of control and all of a sudden they show up and they're like, oh yeah, I guess I don't care about my constituents?
Well, I think there has to be some element of it being intentional, because I just don't think that human beings, otherwise we render morality moot. Morality is only applicable when you could say that there's some measure of intention or choice that people make. So we can't really condemn a person if we say, well, they're just brainwashed and, they don't know what they're doing. I think they know what they're doing, but I agree with you. They're also very much caught up in a system that exerts a great deal of pressure on them. So it's some combination of the two, but so long as there's some element of intention, there's some potential for change. Because if it was just the system,
right.
what would be appealed to get them to say, well, maybe you don't have to see things that way, or maybe you don't have to behave the way that you are.
And I'd love your thought. I'm guessing you're in the boomer generation?
Yeah, I'm 1952.
Okay. Well, same year my mom was born. I'm watching things as I'm the youngest of the Gen X generation. I cling to it like like nobody's business. It feels as if like boomers had this awakening, right? The summer of love and psychedelics really coming up in the 60s and 70s. And that awakening, I don't know if people just fell back asleep and forgot how important their fire and their energy and their desire for social justice was in their youth. And now it seems like so many, especially politically, boomers clinging to power and being just absolutely unwilling to share that power, be benevolent with that power, turn over that, like, whatever. And I guess I wonder what the hell happened. Why? I don't get it. I am neither wired to seek money or power, and it has been challenging sometimes to make money for that reason. But I literally fundamentally cannot understand why someone would cling to that so strongly.
What I would say is that we can't underestimate the power of ideology. I really believe we are surrounded by it. We are embedded by it. It saturates every aspect of our lives. That's what Gramsci means by hegemony, which is that the dominant ideology becomes common sense. It's just the way things are. And when we grow up, we are all immersed in the institutions that are charged with inculcating and reinforcing that ideology, right? So you could have an awakening, so to speak, right? But not everybody who's awake stays awake. I mean, it just doesn't work that way, because there can always be countervailing pressures to bring them back in line. And we can't really underestimate how powerful those things are. So what we have to be mindful of is that waking up is not a one-time thing.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm awake and now, yay,
Yay, peace and love forever.
it's an ongoing project.
Yeah, that's true. And if you are being rewarded for compliance, then you may be more inclined to do that. Wow. It's so fascinating to me. Like, I have always walked through my life assuming that everyone values what I value, which is like doing the deep work, right? Like really showing up for my soul's mission in this lifetime. And it's been a very sad truth to find that is not everybody's like path and desire. And so what do you think is it temperament? Like, is there just something within us that's like, no, we really are going to do this work in this lifetime. And these other people are going to have to, like, I don't know, work harder to find that spark? What do you think that is?
Well, let's go back to what you were talking about at the very start, about the idea of the wounded healer.
Yeah.
Okay. Which is an archetype that goes thousands and thousands of years back, all the way back to the first healers, which really were shamans, right?
Yep.
The shamans were you'll never find that in history of psychology, of course. Right. It's like, Aristotle or Plato, whatever.
Right.
But it was shamans, right? And what we know about shamans is that they have a high likelihood of experiencing a crisis that even looks like they're having a psychotic break, right?
Yeah.
That they're out of touch with reality. But there is a person in the community who recognizes that that's a sign that they're the next shaman, right? And so that person and the community together allow that person to move through that crisis in a way where the potential for transformation is fulfilled. Okay. Do you see what I'm saying?
Oof, that feels so powerful.
But
yeah,
by the same token, you can have a person who has that crisis and that experience is pathologized, right?
Yeah.
There's something wrong with you. You're psychotic, you're an anarchist, you're out of touch. If you look at research, for example, on people who've had elevated states of consciousness, about 40% of the people in any population have had it at least once, and about 2% have had it repeatedly. Okay. If you ask people who've had that experience, who is the last person you would want to tell about it? Thankfully, it's not a psychologist, although they're up there.
Yeah.
It's a clergy person.
Yeah, right.
Because institutionalized religion doesn't want anything to do with mystics.
Yeah.
They're troublemakers.
Because it threatens their power. Right.
Right. And because that's what religion is really all about.
Right.
It's not about creed and rites.
Right.
It's about experiencing a state of oneness with the absolute. Okay.
Right.
So I think what one big difference is, how do we process crises that people have? Do we give them do we see them as an opening, or do we see them as a threat?
Right.
So it's not that being wounded that makes you a healer. It's what you do with your woundedness.
Yes.
That makes you a healer.
Have you heard of, I'm trying to look at this book, Steve Taylor? He wrote a book called The Leap, The Science of Spiritual Awakening, and all of his work is around like how through history we've treated spiritual awakening, and essentially this sort of like period of time where humans were like more in sync with the earth and spirit and all the things, and then we had like this great fall essentially from that knowing, and then knowledge became the thing that everybody was seeking. And I don't know whether this is in his book or other places. God knows where I get my information. I listen to so many podcasts. It's insane. But what I've heard is we are at the precipice of really integrating the spiritual wisdom and knowledge that we've, gained from the the Renaissance and whatnot. That feels more hopeful to me, because being more in tune with spirit and nature lends to relationality so much better than knowledge and the cognitive way of being. There's no question there, but thoughts?
Well, there's Karen Armstrong, who's a historian of religion, says, there's different ways that we know things.
Right.
Mythos and logos. And one is not better than the other. It's that they're applicable to different things, right? Ken Wilber.
Yes.
Who, right?
Yeah. Yep.
He talks about
I was going to ask if you knew spiral dynamics and all that. Yeah.
He talks about the same thing. He says, it's not that science is a bad thing, but it isn't for everything. Right?
Yes.
But we are still living the legacy of modernism.
Yes.
And, which of course, capitalism is a manifestation of modernism. So it is, again, ideologies that have been pushed to such an extreme that it does not allow for alternative ways of knowing. It doesn't allow for alternative ways of being.
Right.
But that creates such a state of imbalance that eventually it turns on itself and becomes self-defeating.
Yeah.
And that can be then the opportunity for a crisis where you begin to say, there's more to life, as you say, than money, okay?
Right.
There's more to life than what I possess, in spite of the fact that, again, there are all these countervailing pressures and messages that want to push you back into that groove. So people who wake up have to understand that they're going to be seen as sometimes as crazy, as rebels, as troublemakers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it takes a certain amount of courage to be who you are in spite of all those pressures.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's shift into more deeply talking about capitalism, because I do have some really specific questions about that. And what you like, I'm having big thoughts and I'm like, okay, how do I make words out of these big thoughts that I have? Well, let's just start here. I've heard people say that anytime you are laboring for somebody else, that's exploitation. Okay, this is where I'm like, okay, walk me from like I'm a total idiot and help me understand because I'm thinking like I've a former small business owner having employees myself, I certainly was not trying to exploit, right? Trying to support people and like making their wages, keeping the business operating, right? Is there such a thing as a benevolent small business? And if not, what do we do with the people who really don't want to work for themselves? Because there's a guy that worked for me. He will never leave the practice. I sold it. He is going to retire from there because he just doesn't want to do the administrative work of having his own practice. Like, help walk me through like the 101 of how that works.
It's probably a dangerous thing to be absolute about certain things, right? But in general, if you look at slavery, then that moved from that to feudalism, right? And then that moved from feudalism to capitalism. What is common to all of those things is that there are the haves and the have-nots.
Yep.
Okay? All the way back to ancient times. In ancient times, you'd have the emperor, the king, and then their retainers, and then everybody else. Right? So these kind of disparities are not just disparities in power, they're material disparities, right? You're working to make somebody else wealthier, make somebody else richer, more powerful, whatever the case may be. Okay. In capitalism, that's the employer and the employee.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What Marx says is that your class is where you are in the production system. Okay. Mm-hmm. And the point that he's trying to make is that human beings, inherent in the nature of being a human being, is that we want to create and produce. And that there's always going to be a certain amount of surplus, right? Because if you are in a society that has children or older people, they're not producing anything, right? Mm-hmm. So the person who's producing understands that part of what they produce is going to be given to somebody else, right? Mm-hmm. But given to somebody else in order for them to develop and live, okay? Mm-hmm. When what you're producing is taken away from you in exchange for a wage that doesn't make up for what you've produced, when that excess is used to enrich the person that you're working for, when what you are producing you don't have any control over, those variables lend themselves to exploitation, right? You mm-hmm. could be exploited. Mm-hmm. Now, is it possible that you could have an employer who says, well, I'm going to ensure that whatever I'm making, you can benefit from? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a better system. Mm-hmm. But how many employers do that?
Yeah. And I mean, that's honestly one of the places that I'm trying to make better in group practice because, the way that things are license-wise right now, an LC or an LSW, an LPC, they can't work for themselves. They can't work independently in Illinois. And so they want to be in group practices, right? Like, so there's an opportunity there that feels important to those people because if they had to just work in community mental health, they have some choices taken away. And what I have seen at least with the people that come and want to work with me, because honestly, I think the exploiters are like, fuck that bitch. I don't want her taking away my money. But people who work with me tend to want to be as benevolent as possible. And what has been interesting is trying to balance. Employees seem to think that the money that they are making and not taking home themselves is then going into the owner's pocket. And I can tell you straight up, it's staying in the business. Like, and I can be straight up. I paid myself, I think I ended up taking home like $80,000 a year, which is almost what a person can make if they're seeing clients.
Mm-hmm.
And what I was producing for the practice I wasn't seeing clients and generating income that way. It was more thought leadership, teaching, speaking, trying to get the name of the practice out there. And so the thing that I did completely profit from is not having to pay for trainings. So like I would take 1 trillion trainings, right? That's the way that I sort of like, that's the benefit that I took from the practice. And I would try to share that wisdom as much as I could with the staff.
Mm-hmm.
So my hope in small business, in group practice, that it can be more relational, that it can be, because, if you're seeing 20 people a week, that's not an exploitative, schedule. About 50% of the wages seems to be what's sustainable for businesses. And it's been such an interesting, I just keep coming back to people need to care about each other more and be less selfish in order for more collective forms of economics, work, anything to function, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
People just need to give a shit.
Mm-hmm. Well, greed is the issue that becomes particularly pernicious in a capitalist system where there's never enough, right? More is always better.
Right.
When you have income disparities like we do, which are off the charts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where the top 1% makes almost whatever it is,
Right.
A large percentage of the issue must be that we need a political, a social, an economic system where all people are able to flourish,
Right.
where they're able to have a decent life, right?
Right.
And when there is no scarcity, that's another myth of capitalism.
Right.
Capitalism says there's not enough. Well, there is enough.
There is enough.
Right.
Yes.
It's how it's distributed that is a problem, right? No one needs that much money.
I was blown away. I can't remember what I was watching, but it was something about billionaires. And I didn't realize that most other countries have laws against how much money you can make.
Mm-hmm.
The U.S., is it the only place that allows people to make this much money?
No. I mean, the U.S. is the most extreme of them,
Mm-hmm.
certainly.
Mm-hmm.
And capitalism is moving out of control in places where,
mm-hmm.
for a while, it was more tempered. Like the UK is more out of control. France, Germany.
Mm-hmm.
It shows again just how powerful capitalism can be. And even in China, there are people who are very wealthy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there are certain laws in certain countries that say this is the cap.
Yeah.
For what you can make.
Mm-hmm.
Because if that law wasn't in place, the odds are that people would just say, well, sky's the limit, right? So socialism, as I see it, isn't just an economic and political system. It is, again, a framing of values.
Yes.
Where one of the values of socialism is caring for your fellow human beings. Mm-hmm. Another is fairness.
Right.
Another is democracy. Mm-hmm. People having some degree of control over the circumstances of their lives. Mm-hmm. We tend to associate democracy with capitalism, but there's nothing democratic about capitalism.
Right.
It's just,
right.
Right. It's whoever has the most money has more power.
Mm-hmm. Do you think, are you familiar with the fourth turning?
No.
I think you'd like this idea. The original book, The Fourth Turning, was written in like 1992 or something like that by two historians, and they traced back to, the dawn of quote unquote modern civilization, the Greeks and the Romans, and they basically tracked that every 80 to 100 years or so, we would, as civilization, go through 4 seasons: spring, summer, fall, and winter. And the generations that were born under each season have a particular task or archetype, right, that they follow. And obviously, we're in winter right now. And, I keep thinking back to, what was happening during World War II before, we got a lot of the socialized programs like Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, right, all of those things. I'm curious what you see. How can we make moves forward? Because, like you said before, when you're in a crisis, we need then somebody to shepherd us through that crisis and say, this isn't bad or wrong. This is going to lead us to something really important. Like, what do you see as the path forward to get to a more, whether we call it socialism, whether we call it actually caring about humans, right? Anti-capital, whatever we call it. What's that path?
Well, it is going to require a decline. Just history.
Yeah.
You have to learn from history.
Yes.
And every empire has a decline, and our American empire is in decline.
Yep.
And that scares the bejeebers out of everybody, right? I know it does. But whether it scares you or not, you have to look at the facts. We are, as a society, we're in decline. We can't sustain the system that we put in place. We can't sustain bullying everybody because now people will say, you can't bully us anymore. Yeah. We can't sustain having military everywhere and spending that much on the military.
Yep.
So we will need to pass through a crisis. And the question then becomes, I agree with you, what will be the way that we see forward? It could be in a positive direction, but it could also not be. Again, history doesn't tell us that things always end as we would like them to end. I am hopeful that the excesses that we're seeing right now are getting people to be more aware of the deficiencies of the system that we're dealing with right now, where they say, this is not a good way to live, where the wealthy keep getting wealthier and the poor keep getting poorer. It's not a good way to live when we have a pandemic and more people die than had to die because our healthcare system is so bad, right? This is not a good system that we may have a climate that is going to kill people because of famine or because of extreme weather, okay? But human beings, unfortunately, are very good at denying things too. So it's going to take people who can see these again as potential openings and recognize the fear, the pain, the anxiety that accompanies it, but nonetheless can provide people with the message that there is a way of coming out of this that brings you to a better place.
I have put myself firmly in the camp of it's going to get better, not because I know that it's going to get better, but because that's the way I can put one foot in front of the other in service of that mission, right? Like, so everything I'm developing right now, working on right now, it's interesting because I keep finding myself not meeting, and I say people, but like people, I'm trying to sell my services, right? Like to help group practices be more benevolent, be more like shared resources, move to collective models, right? Whatever. And everyone is so afraid right now and so in scarcity because of that fear, they're like, Sarah, you are crazy.
Mhm.
My podcast editor was just like, yeah, it's really tough to be like ahead of the curve. Like, this is the only way I know how to make it through and how to try to let people know it will eventually be okay. Whether it's society really moves forward or we get stuck, but we will be okay. I mean, those of us with a certain amount of privilege, most people listening probably have master's degrees here because we're all therapists, right? So I'm assuming a lot of us have a decent access to privilege. I don't know. Like, how are you getting yourself through this time?
It's not always easy, but like you, I have to believe that irrespective of my not knowing how it's going to turn out, and I'm just one person, I think of it as, what do I do as one person to move it in one direction as opposed to the other? And so that's why I write what I write. That's why I do presentations. And what I feel good about is that it is received well by quite a number of people.
Is this different to what you experienced at earlier points in your career?
It is. I think that there is a greater receptivity to the idea that things have gotten too out of whack.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be this way. I go sometimes to, like No King's Day and things like that. And that reassures me because there are people, older, younger, service people, and I see them saying, no, it doesn't have to be this way.
Right.
It doesn't have to be this way. So you don't save the world.
Right.
I see it as, what does God want from me? I'm put here. Why am I put here right now for this moment?
Yeah.
And what does this moment require of me right now?
Yes.
What does this encounter require of me right now? I always feel as though I'm in the service of something. When I'm at my best, I'm in the service of something bigger than me.
Yes. And that speaks to, I think, probably the other point of your book that you were talking about is really inviting spirituality back into the therapy room. And I've been saying that for at least a couple of years now, that I think that is the next level of reintegrating, because God, if therapy and psychology isn't a spiritual pursuit, I don't know what is. But I find it really interesting having a lot of colleagues that feel very differently.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're dealing with again, modernism here and the antipathy. And again, antipathy towards organized religion, which I can completely understand. But, I'm not interested in Christianity. I'm interested in Jesus. I'm not interested in Buddhism. I'm interested in the Buddha. Those are people who woke up and said, things don't have to be this way. Don't believe this because I'm telling you. Believe this because you can have this experience too. You can have this. I'm not special. We're all a incarnation of the absolute. This is what we're meant to be. And so, of course, if you want to be whole, how can you be whole, which is what health is, by omitting what is the most essential aspect of who you are, which I believe is spiritual. That's the most essential aspect of who I am.
And what you just said goes back to, at the beginning, what I was sort of complaining about is a lack of embodiment in a lot of the social justice movements that I've seen just, fairly recently. Yeah, that's exactly what it is, right? And Jesus was a socialist, if anyone, and embodied exactly what you're saying, like just be.
Right. It's the lowly that deserve our greatest degree of compassion, what he called the Anawin, because they are the ones that are most vilified. They are the ones that most dehumanized, right? And that's what the prophetic vocation is. And then as psychologists, we have a prophetic vocation, which is to call out injustice and say, this is not acceptable. This is not how you treat these people. And, it is a violation of their inherent worth and dignity to exploit them, to oppress them, to discriminate against them. But as you say, that must be embodied in the sense that we embody it in our words, we embody it in our actions, we embody it in our commitments. So you don't tell people things in therapy, you show them.
Mm-hmm.
Telling is not what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Showing is what is important.
And inviting to experience.
Right. Which is the experience is, what is it like being with somebody like me?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Who may not see things as you do.
Mm-hmm.
Many times clients say, this is uncomfortable because you're not like anybody I've ever met before.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not, you're breaking the rules. You're supposed to be like everybody else. Right?
Yeah.
But that dissonance, that discomfort is again a way of shaking people up.
Mm-hmm.
And then the shaking up leads to waking up.
Yeah.
Which is, I can be different. Or not everybody in the world is like my mom or dad or whoever. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and as we come to a close, I wish we had so much more time. I'm thinking about, again, sort of like operationalizing and or, stepping stones to, I'm hearing an ideological shift, right, that needs to be made. I'm also hearing an institutional shift that needs to be made, right? Education, and I'm not just talking about with therapists, though, man, I would love to remake the education system for therapists so it was more focused on our own healing work and doing it from the inside out. But also just education in general, right? We need to be encouraging more curiosity and exploration than just, right answers. Obviously, there's political shifts that need to be made. Like, what if you could make the perfect system, right? The perfect script to get us there. What do you think we should start with?
Well, some of the things that you said, Sarah, are very essential. Work always begins with oneself. And that's hardly ever in education.
Mm-hmm.
Except like to say, you're not fitting in or that kind of crap,
Right.
Part of it also, I think, is helping people to understand that reading psychology is great, but you should read history. You should read sociology. You should read poetry. You should read novels.
Mm-hmm.
That learning is more than just discipline specific.
Mm-hmm.
You see?
Absolutely.
And it's also telling people you have to connect with the lived experiences of people that may be very different
Mm-hmm.
than you. Rather than you teaching them, let them teach you. Let them teach you of what it's like to grow up in a neighborhood that is violent and has no grocery stores. Listen to that experience and try and put yourself in that person's place. So I think that those three things would, by themselves, begin to make a very big difference.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here, for your time, for the work that you've been doing. And I certainly hope to stay connected because you've got a lot of wisdom that
Thank
I
you.
keep learning from. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
Right now, I have, with my co-editor on my other book on radical therapy, we have a counter psych, COUNTER psych, on Reddit. So you can find us on there. We're going to be posting things there. And that's a way to stay connected.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I'm really excited for people to hear this conversation.
Thank you, Sarah, and good luck with your own work. I wish you all the best.
Thank you.